And they said, we like learning outcomes because it gave us a clear idea of what we expected. It helped us in our professional development. It wasn't the case of us going on a course and having no idea what this course was all about in terms of what we would be able to do when we finished the course. So it encouraged us to engage more actively in the course. So learning outcomes will help the students to buy in, to get involved in the course once they know what's ahead of them. And of course, when we use learning outcomes, you really are engaging the students from the word go. And it is so important that learning outcomes should be made explicit to the students. That when you go in there the first day of the module, you should make it clear to the students what you're expecting of them by the end of the module. Now, this was a very interesting paper. This was our Professor of Chemical Engineering, John Fitzpatrick. And he did his Masters in Teaching and Learning with me. He wrote a wonderful thesis on the effectiveness of introducing learning outcomes into the Faculty of Engineering. And one of the things that came out very strongly from the students was that the students liked the idea of making the learning outcomes explicit, making them clear. Learning outcomes shouldn't be hidden away in some part of the website that nobody visits, or hidden away inside in a whole load of documentation. So that's the sort of thing. So these were the recommendations from the students, and it helped them to get a clear indication of where they were going in the program. So the advantages then is recognition, engagement, mobility, all of which, of course, are one of the top aims of the Bologna process. So, also, some general advantages here, when we're designing curriculum, as we saw, whether it's the bottom-up approach or the top-down, the learning outcomes certainly help you. With the constructive alignment, the relation between teaching, learning, and assessment is highlighted with learning outcomes. Students are kept on task and motivated and have clear information. And of course, in terms of quality assurance, which is really important, it brings clarity to qualifications, not just within the university, but clarity between one university and another. And of course, the whole idea of mobility and mutual recognition of qualifications, very important. Now, there are some issues when introducing learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are part of the Bologna process, which is a huge sort of reform package, but they're an essential part of it. Whether you introduce them bottom-up or top-down, that depends on the individual institution. As I said, in our own university, we introduce them to existing courses from the bottom up. Now, there will be some members of staff who are skeptical. In a university, you can get people who do not want any sort of a change. You will get a professor who will say, I have been teaching this course for the past 30 years, and the course is going well. And we ask them then, prove it to us. What evidence do you have that the course cannot be improved? And of course, that sets them thinking. If if you ask them for evidence. So, the whole idea of restricting academic freedom and so on, that professors are autonomous and so they can do what they like. But, the days of the dictators are gone, and students now have the right for clarity and transparency. So, make sure that people like yourselves who are training others in learning outcomes, that you have all the background knowledge and the positive implications of learning outcomes. This is a problem area that we have in some countries, learning outcomes and competences. And it's no problem in a country which uses competences. You just have to write each competence in terms of learning outcomes. The issues that were raised in our own university, some people say, oh, I don't like Bloom's taxonomy. Bologna doesn't say you have to use Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is only a toolkit for helping you to write learning outcomes. There are other taxonomies. John Mix has one called the Solo taxonomy, but it's very complicated. I wouldn't like it at all. I like myself the Bloom's taxonomy because it's simple and it makes good sense. But any taxonomy can be used. All that Bologna says is that you must write learning outcomes. It doesn't say you have to use a particular toolkit. The second one then is the preference to write competences. This was a problem we had in South America, and there are also some countries in Europe where they use competences a lot. Like in Germany, for example. So when we were running training courses there, and they say, oh, all our courses are written in competences. Are you saying we have to change the competences? No. Just take the competence and write in learning outcomes. Because Bologna emphasizes learning outcomes. So that isn't really a problem at all. Some advice from Stephen Adams, it needs a strategy for quality enhancement. Somebody in the university has to sit down and make out a plan. These are our trainers, these are our seminars, these are our international speakers, okay? And these are the deadlines by which things have to be done. And it has to come from the top down. The rector has to buy into the Bologna, resources have to be made available, but it is a great investment. Because the most important facility, the most important treasure that we have here in the university are the teachers, you people. You are the most important investment. Because if the quality of teaching is of a high standard in this university, everything else will follow. The standard of learning will rise, and throughout the university there'll be this striving for excellence. So the rector has to invest money in ensuring that its staff are good teachers and good researchers. But good teachers must come first, number one. So this is what Stephen Adams is talking about in a paper that he wrote there about the structure of quality enhancement. In other words, Bologna is improving what is already there. It's enhancing quality. We're not saying that it's the answer to everything, but it will certainly help you to be better teachers. Interesting, the Porto conference that I spoke about earlier on, it said there, one of the recommendations was that you must disseminate user-friendly material. There's a lot of stuff out there which is jargon, awfully difficult, I give one example there in the tuning. That's the worst I've come across.
But there are other samples of material that make out as if learning outcomes are very complicated things. Whereas in 1 hour, you're an expert on learning outcomes. So this sort of thing, you definitely need a sort of integrated approach to it. There needs to be incentives. And the incentives, of course, are to reward staff who have taken it upon themselves to improve their own teaching and learning in terms of promotion. So to insist that if somebody is going to be promoted, they must provide evidence of good teaching. So in conclusion, I would say that in our university, there was great momentum generated by the quality promotion movement. It was generated by organising conferences, by setting up the Teaching and Learning Centre, by giving qualifications to our teaching staff, and by running lots of lunchtime seminars for the staff. It is so important when training the staff to keep things simple, because otherwise, if you try to make it complicated, people just reject it. They say, we are busy people, we haven't time to look at this nonsense. So you keep it simple, as I have tried to do it this morning when teaching you about learning outcomes. It is important that support is given to staff. There has to be a teaching and learning centre in the university with somebody in charge, so that a professor can come to that person and say, look, I'm trying to write my learning outcomes, I'm having difficulty, can you help me? That sort of service is vital. So staff training, there is expertise within each department, so that if this university had a postgraduate cert in teaching and learning, or if you linked up and got the certificate, a joint certificate between our university and your university. You know, that some of our lecturers would come over here, and maybe some of you would come over to our university. Because we already have a course that's up and running, you do not have to reinvent the wheel. So there are all sorts of possibilities, okay? But definitely, the UCC quality promotion unit was the key. And you are so lucky in this university to have people who is going to get all of this work done in the university, and hopefully we'll see some of you people coming to Cork, and I will arrange for the beautiful weather just like you have arranged for me. So now, I've said enough. I don't know how our time is going, but we're okay, Brandon. Now, questions, discussions. You're not too exhausted to clap anyway. That's a good start. So, has anybody written learning outcomes before? We haven't done it? Okay, right. Sorry. For programs or modules. You've done some, okay. So what you teach philosophy, is it? And did you find it hard to write it?
Well, it was challenging.
Yeah. Would you find it easier now? Okay, well that's good anyway. So at least you gained something from the seminar. Yeah, really? Very good. Has anybody else written learning outcomes for their modules? You've tried something else? As an engineer, thank you, very good.
Yes, but it was quite easy.
It was quite easy. Good.
Because you have equations and the sockets and you count all the sockets and all the sockets.
Excellent. Good. So there is no great problem. Fantastic. And would you be able to go back now and have a look at this constructive alignment.
Yes.
That would be the challenge. That would be step 2.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, that's great. Great to be such a positive attitude. What about medicine? You're very good in medicine at writing learning outcomes. What area do you...
Physiology.
Physiology?
Both.
Oh, both physiology. Oh, very good. Yeah. Well, I would imagine with physiology it's fairly straightforward. You know. In fact, I remember after one of our seminars, our professor of physiology came up to me and he said, I arrived here at university 10 years ago as a professor of physiology, and I was then given a timetable. I said, there, and you have 20 lectures a week to give. And he said, in the 10 years, this is the first time I've learned anything about learning outcomes. It was very interesting. He was very positive about it, and he did a super job. He became one of our trainers, and he did a super job in the physiology department. So when you come to Cork on our postgraduate certificate, I'll introduce you to your fellow physiologists. Yeah.
Actually, I do have a question.
Sure.
So I just want to check if I did my math correctly. The number of learning outcomes per module. So if I understand correctly,
Yeah.
your suggestion is to make something in the order of 8 learning
About
modules
that.
per module.
Per
module
module.
is something in the order of 6 to 10 ECTS, correct?
Something like that, exactly.
Okay. So that would make, if I did my math correctly, so let's say if it takes 6 ECTS,
Yes.
that should be something like in the order of 150 to 200 working hours of student. Correct?
Each ECTS credit is worth between 25 and 30. So
Right.
supposing you have a 10 ECTS credits, that's 250 hours for a 10 ECTS credit. And if you multiply that then, 10 into 60, multiplied by 60, 250 by 60 is about 1,500 years, 1,500 hours. So in one academic year, a student is expected to put in about 1,500 hours of work between lectures, study, seminars, exams, everything else.
So to rephrase the question I wanted to ask, so if I go from, let's say, 200 working student hours, and I do the math towards how many lectures, that is, if I remember correctly, your ratio was something in the order 1 to 5. 1 to 4, 1 to 5.
1 to 5 what, sorry?
Lectures and the working hours.
Individual work.
Oh,
Individual
yes,
lecture,
yes.
right?
Yeah,
So that-
24 hours of lectures corresponds roughly to a 5 ECTS credit.
Okay.
You know, I think they work it out on the basis that if a student spends an hour at a lecture, they could spend up to 5 hours studying the content of that lecture and then revising it and going to an exam. That's roughly what they use in my university.
So in practical terms, it means that for 50 hours of lectures, in the order of 50 hours, one would need to write 8 learning outcomes.
About that, exactly. That's exactly it.
Thank you.
You know, now, the point you raised is a good one. Do you write the same number of learning outcomes for a 5 credit module as a 10 credit as a 15? Yes. 8 learning outcomes, we allow us to go to 9, but the literature recommends 8, because if you go more than 8, I mean, we had some professors now who would say 15 learning outcomes, but they were being too specific. They were learning outcomes almost one per lecture that they were giving, and they were being too confined. You see, when you write learning outcomes, not only must you go across Bloom's taxonomy, but you must also allow yourself flexibility in the assessment, so that you are not tied to asking the same question every year, so that your exam is very predictable. So learning outcomes are not restrictive. They give you great flexibility, in fact, but flexibility within the learning outcome, and the students can see how the learning outcomes are related to the assessment. You know? So about 8 per module is about what is recognized.
One more question. So
Yeah.
toward the end of your second lecture, you mentioned that, or suggested that the rector should invest money
Yes,
to learning outcomes, implementing the Bologna ideas.
yes.
So are there any funds available for him at European level, let's say, to support my going to Cork, participating in your courses, or even doing a master's?
Well, I'm sure there's all sorts of mobility funds that staff can use. And I've no doubt that if the rector makes a strong case, he can get funding or he can allocate funding. Certainly in our university, the European Universities Association ran some conferences and we were able to get money so that our staff could attend those conferences for free. You know, so there are all sorts of mechanisms. It's always complicated getting money for European funding. Pika is an expert in it because she had all of the funding forms ready for signing yesterday. Mountains of people. This woman is a genius because my figure, I flew Ryanair, so it was fairly cheap, and then I flew EasyJet, so it's fairly cheap. So it's not very expensive. But what was great is that Pika will be able to pay me back the money that I paid on my airfare. And it's EU funding, I think. It's EU funding. So hopefully, if Pika can get EU funding to bring me over here, there might be EU funding to bring you over to us.
As you can probably imagine, the medical community is quite fond of certificates or diplomas proving or showing that I'm a competent person to spread the ideas you taught us today. So, in order to get at least a realistic chance to convince my colleagues to start writing down the learning outcomes and everything else, I would probably need to get something like that.
You could. You see, and that's exactly what our staff wanted too. They said, we will be delighted to go to these seminars and to work with you and to produce portfolios as evidence of our teaching.